I know when you look at me, you don't see someone that you should be afraid of. But you're wrong.
Yellowjackets is the new horror series on Showtime, but is it worth a watch? A wildly talented high school girls soccer team becomes the unlucky survivors of a plane crash deep in Ontario wilderness. Yellowjackets was suggested to me, and they pitched it that it was kind of like True Detective. That's one of my favorite seasons of television ever. And I watched a few episodes last Sunday, and I was immediately hooked. And that's the first thing I want to talk about with the show is the first few episodes of this show are absolutely riveting. There is a sequence with the aftermath of a plane crash that was absolutely intense. Like, I held my breath for, I think, 10 minutes. And it was some of the most unsettling things I've seen in a very long time, but it's extremely well done. In the first couple episodes, there are shots where we flash forward to these girls in the wilderness where they're fully submersed into the wilderness. And it is some of the creepiest imagery I think I've ever seen. There are some shots that were honestly frightening. And I gotta give props to the director and the cinematographer because those images, I won't talk about it too much, it'd be spoilers, and this is gonna be spoiler free, were just absolutely haunting. If you didn't know this about me, I'm an Eagle Scout. And I'll be transparent with you guys, I fucking hate camping. So yeah, it doesn't really make sense. I'm an Eagle Scout, but whatever, it happened. But anything that has to do with surviving the wilderness and being trapped somewhere in the woods or anything like that was always just frightening to me. I always thought the Blair Witch Project was terrifying. So this type of horror and this type of thriller was right up my alley. I really enjoyed the first season of Yellowjackets. Is it perfect? No, not at all. But it is definitely a fantastic first season for a show that has some great ideas and concepts. And the tone of it is just perfect. Like I said, it's extremely creepy and intense, and there are some images that I just won't forget, probably forever. I also need to give a shout out to the score of this series. It is perfect. It is some of the creepiest music I've ever heard. And it really elevates some of these scenes of tension and suspense and horror, and it makes the series stick. It makes those sequences feel really real, and like I said, it's something you just won't forget about. Performances wise, I think everyone does a great job, but my favorite performance by far is Christina Ricci. She plays this girl that seems like she's full of confidence, but she's really not, and she'll go to extreme measures to get basically what she wants. And she was just a blast to watch, but at the same time unsettling. She was perfect. She was hands down my favorite performance, and she's probably one of the most interesting characters in the show as well. This isn't a spoiler, but the show takes place in two different timelines. It takes place in 1996 when the plane crash happened, and then in present day where some of the survivors are dealing with different mysteries going around that timeline. So we cut back and forth to 1996 and 2022. And I think all of that is actually woven together very well. Never gets confusing, and I think they make excellent choices of where they place some sequences for certain episodes where we have something happen in present day, then we cut to something happening in the wilderness, and I think all of that meshes extremely well. Like I said, the show isn't perfect. There are definitely some things I feel like they need to work out for later seasons, specifically with these two different timelines. Yes, they mesh well together, but I'm not going to lie, anytime they go to present day, it is way less interesting and way less intense than anything that's happening in the woods. And I know there's not much you can really do about that, and the present day stuff is extremely important for the story. There are some interesting parts, but I can't lie, it's like night and day how much more intense those sequences are in the woods compared to things that are happening in present day. So sometimes the show does have issues with keeping your interest whenever it flashes back to 2022. It definitely has some issues after the first 2 or 3 episodes because then it definitely slows down a lot. And I get there are a lot of parts we have to develop our characters and develop some plot points and things like that. But just how intense and creepy those first 2 or 3 episodes were, and then the next 4 were just there for the story, and I get they're important, but they just weren't nearly as intense and as interesting as the first 3 episodes. I think overall it's written pretty well, but there are some horrific lines of dialogue that I cannot ignore, especially in some of the middle episodes. And I really want to talk about spoilers, but I won't. But I just feel like this show in general could be a lot scarier and a lot creepier and a lot more horrific if they take away this supernatural element out of the show. Now, it's hard to judge this because this is season 1. They already renewed for season 2. There's definitely way more of the story to tell, and they don't give us many answers about the supernatural elements, which is totally fine. But for me, I think the show would be a little bit creepier if that all this fucked up things that are happening in the wilderness were more because they're in the wilderness and they're kind of losing their minds. And that's kind of why they have to take drastic measures to do some of the things that they do. I could be wrong, and this isn't a spoiler, but it seems like the show is implying that there is a supernatural presence that's causing them to do these things, which, like I just said, maybe it's developed better in later seasons, but I just feel like for now, I think the idea of being trapped in the woods and then having to do whatever you have to do to survive and doing some pretty fucking horrific things, it's just way scarier to me. And lastly, there are interesting characters in the show, but there are some characters that just make terrible decisions. Not in the sense of they did something horrific out in the woods and they did something they had to do to survive. It's not like that. It's more like they make some terrible personal decisions that make you hate these characters. And maybe that's what they're going for. But at the same time, I don't think that's what they're going for. So sometimes it makes it hard to root for some of these characters. And that can be a little frustrating. But overall, for a first season, I think this is really well done, especially for a horror show. Like I said, there are some images that I just will never forget. And there are some interesting characters, there's some great sequences, and overall an interesting story. And I really want to see what happens next with later seasons. And I think there are some parts of the show that definitely could be better. And I think the creators of the show are fully aware of that. And that's definitely things they can fix in later seasons. Like I said before, this is an impressive first season for this horror show. If you're a big fan of horror, I guarantee you're going to enjoy it. And I highly recommend it. I'm going to give season 1 of Yellowjackets 8 Davy Daves. I will admit, when I first started this, I thought this was a miniseries, so I was wondering how they're going to wrap some of this up pretty quickly. Then I read it was renewed for a season 2, and I was like, maybe they will wrap some stuff up pretty quickly. But they don't. There's definitely a lot more of the story to be told. That's why I'm excited for another season. There are some things that wrapped up in kind of a weird way, but that's what the hardest part about reviewing these shows that are still going on, like of a first season or just in general, because there's so much more of the story to be told. So I could look back after I see season 2 and be like, wow, season 1 was way better than I thought. Or I'll look back and be like, this was a waste of time. You just never know. So, season 1 of Yellowjackets. Let me know what you guys thought of it. You've seen it. I'm curious to hear. And thank you so much for watching. Click here to see more of Dave's Takes.